Derek pulled his worn jacket tighter around him as he walked through the Eastgate district, the chill in the air mocking the warmth he tried to muster inside. Each step felt heavy with the weight of unpaid bills and dashed hopes, yet he fought to keep his head held high. "I just need one break," he muttered, determination flickering in his chest like the flame of a candle on a gusty night. He passed by the familiar sights of the neighborhood, children playing, mothers chatting, and elderly neighbors sharing stories. But for him, the dreams of being an artist felt like shining stars on a cloudy night, always out of reach. At the Lakeside Conference Hall, Derek could feel the electric buzz of anticipation as artists gathered for the big reveal. He stepped inside, heart racing as he prepared to present his artwork. The walls were adorned with pieces by artists who had been given opportunities he could only dream about. His moment arrived, and he stood before the judges, a mix of excitement and nerves bubbling within him. "This piece represents hope and resilience in the face of adversity," he began, gesturing passionately to the vibrant strokes of color on his canvas. But as the decision neared, doubt crept in like a thief in the night. When the announcements echoed through the quiet hall, Derek felt his heart plummet. "The winner, chosen for their superior connections, is Emily Richards," the judge declared. A collective murmur passed through the crowd, a mixture of congratulations for Emily and disbelief over Derek's rejection. Derek stood frozen as Emily graciously accepted her award, her glances of privilege piercing through him. At that moment, he heard a familiar, arrogant voice cut through the air. "Well, at least they know how to keep mediocrity in check," Richard Blackwell sneered to a group of his wealthy companions, who chuckled at his contempt. Derek's heart raced with humiliation as he overheard Richard's derogatory remarks. "It's a shame talent means nothing without the right connections," Richard continued, walking away with a smirk, much like a king surveying his castle. Derek's fists clenched, a fire igniting within him. A fellow artist approached him gently. "Derek, don't let them get to you. You have something special," she whispered, trying to comfort him. But all he could feel was the stinging resentment of ridicule directed at his efforts. As the night wore on, Derek stood at the back of the hall, feeling invisible. He watched as privileged conversations carried on, oblivious to the struggles of those who worked tirelessly for recognition. "Why do they get to dictate who is worthy and who is not?" he thought, frustration bubbling. The weight of injustice settled heavily in his chest, and in that moment, he confronted the reality of his circumstances. "This system is rigged against people like me. I can't just accept it," he resolved, tears pricking his eyes. How could he, a passionate artist with dreams, face a world that dismissed him solely due to his background? Drawing a deep breath, Derek made a decision that would alter the course of his life. "I refuse to let their disdain define my art," he vowed internally. "I will fight back, and I'll channel this pain into something meaningful." He felt a surge of determination like never before. This was more than about art. This was a stand against the oppressive forces that wanted to keep him down. As he walked out of the conference hall that night, Derek felt lighter despite the burden he carried. The sting of humiliation fueled his resolve, transforming his anguish into action. "I will not be silent. I will rise above this," he promised himself, stepping into the night with a rekindled spirit. The battle had only just begun, but Derek could see a glimmer of the path ahead, beckoning him like a lighthouse from afar. With every ounce of strength, he would fight for his rightful place in the art world and beyond, determined that the voice of an underdog would one day echo through the halls of privilege. Derek sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, the weight of the world pressing heavily on his shoulders. Each rejection from a gallery, each dismissive comment from a stranger, felt like a personal attack. He buried his face in his hands, tears welling up as doubt wrapped itself around his heart. "Maybe they're right," he whispered to himself, the words bursting forth like air released from a deflating balloon. His dreams of becoming an artist felt impossibly distant. "I don't belong in this world." He shook his head, fighting back the wave of despair that threatened to drown him. Meanwhile, across the city, Richard Blackwell sat confidently at a lavish corporate meeting, his presence commanding the room. He glanced disdainfully at the colleague who had just suggested diversity initiatives. "Let's not make this a charity event," Richard sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. The room fell silent, but not before. Derek's friend had shared a passionate argument for equity and inclusion in the company. Richard's arrogance maintained the status quo, disregarding those he deemed inferior. Perhaps if we focused on merit rather than appearance, he continued, smirking at the reactions around him. The atmosphere thickened with tension as Richard asserted his dominance, reinforcing the barriers that kept people like Derek at bay. Days turned into weeks, and Derek found himself at a critical professional event in Los Angeles, standing before a panel of judges. This was his moment, his chance to pitch an idea that had consumed his thoughts for months. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, pouring his heart into the presentation. This initiative will not only promote art, but will serve as a voice for those who feel silenced, he explained passionately. But as he spoke, he could see the judge's eyes glazing over. Frustration mounted as he watched them overlook his heartfelt presentation in favor of another candidate. Someone with connections but lacking the spirit and creativity that Derek poured into every stroke of his brush. Whispers filled the air, forming a crushing weight that pressed down on his spirit. Derek felt the sting of invisibility creeping in. Why won't they see me? He thought, his resolve shaken. His heart pounded, and he turned to leave, embarrassment flooding his cheeks. The humiliation clawed at him, igniting a fierce ember of anger deep within. In that moment of despair, he felt a spark flicker into life. I won't be silenced, he swore under his breath, determination filling him as he remembered every moment that led to this. As days passed, the weight of rejection threatened to suffocate him. Derek faced numerous personal and professional setbacks, each one more challenging than the last. Doubts began to creep back in, whispering insidious thoughts that he would never break through the barriers of privilege. But in quieter moments, he clung tightly to his dreams, reminding himself that every great story requires a fight against the odds. There has to be a way, he shouted into the quietness, infusing it with a renewed sense of purpose. I just need to find my voice. Unbeknownst to him, shadows of Richard's arrogance began to loom large. News of mismanagement at Riverbank Enterprises started to surface, raising eyebrows and questions in the corporate community. Whispers grew around the city, and Derek began to feel a flicker of hope. Maybe karma is finally catching up with him, he thought, a spark igniting within. He sensed that the wheels of change were slowly beginning to turn. Inspired by the shifts he noticed, Derek decided to take action. It's time to be heard, he declared to himself one evening, the fire of rebellion igniting. He began organizing stories of marginalized artists who had also faced dismissive attitudes, gathering their voices to raise awareness about the injustices they faced. We are not alone, he said confidently, a newfound determination flowing through him. This was the moment everything could change. Together, we can be the force for change. Derek sat at the small table in the corner of the bustling cafe, his fingers tapping nervously against the wood. He glanced at his phone, waiting for a message that felt like it would never come. His heart sank deeper into despair with each passing minute. Suddenly, a friendly voice broke through his thoughts. Derek, you're still here. An influential artist, Jasmine, approached with a warm smile. I've been looking for you. I wanted to talk about your work. Derek blinked in surprise. You mean my art? Jasmine nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. Your piece at the last exhibit was powerful. You have a voice that deserves to be heard. He felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. Really? You think so? I know so. We need more raw talent like yours in the art scene. Jasmine leaned closer, her tone earnest. I want to help you showcase your work. Let's get you involved in a small exhibit next month. An exhibit? Derek's heart raced. But what if no one likes it? Derek, the world needs to hear your story. You've already shown so much resilience. Don't doubt your worth. Let's make an impact together. Tears welled in his eyes as he found strength in her belief. Thank you, Jasmine. I won't let you down. Days passed, and anticipation buzzed in the air as the small exhibit approached. Derek arrived early to set up, his nerves twisting in knots. The moment finally came, and he stood before the crowd, heart pounding. He introduced his artwork, pouring his soul into every word. This piece reflects our struggles and hopes as artists fighting for a chance to be heard. As he spoke, Derek noticed heads nodding, whispers of approval floating through the room. One viewer clapped and said, "This is amazing. You have a unique perspective." The rush of positive feedback overwhelmed him. For the first time, he felt seen, not just as a hopeful artist but as someone who mattered in a world that had so often disregarded him. Meanwhile, within the polished walls of Riverbank Enterprises, Richard sat in a board meeting, confidence radiating from him. But rumors were swirling. Can we trust his leadership any longer? One board member murmured, eyes darting nervously. The recent financial reports are worrying. People are starting to question him. Another replied, glancing at Richard, who was oblivious to the rising tension. Richard waved a dismissive hand. Those numbers don't matter. We're doing just fine, he said with arrogance, a smirk playing on his lips. But as the meeting concluded, discontent simmered. Whispers of mismanagement began to fester like a wound, unbeknownst to him. As Derek's influence in the local art community grew, articles emerged highlighting his journey, resonating deeply with those who had faced similar struggles. It's time for change, he declared at an artist gathering. Voices rose with shouts of agreement as others joined the movement. Let's elevate our stories, screamed one artist, their passion igniting a fire that spread through the crowd. Derek felt the pulse of hope drive him forward. Meanwhile, Richard's past decisions came home to roost. He's lost touch with reality, a board member said quietly, a note of dread hanging in the air. As financial projections faltered, investors started pulling out, voicing concerns. The landscape of power shifted, revealing Richard's hubris as fragile, teetering on the edge. Derek stood before a crowd at a community forum, his heart racing with purpose. It's all about who you know, not what you create, he addressed passionately. Together, we need to change this narrative. Whispers and nods of solidarity surrounded him, and he felt a wave of unification wash over the gathering. Then, the moment of reckoning arrived. As scandals surrounding Richard burgeoned, a major sponsor released a public statement. We cannot align ourselves with such unethical behavior. Richard's reputation plummeted, and his grip on power began to crumble like dry leaves in autumn. Derek stood at the edge of a stage, the crowd buzzing with excitement. He prepared to speak, anticipation crackling in the air. As he addressed them, the crowd's enthusiasm enveloped him. Together, we rise, he concluded, feeling the energy of the moment surge through him. Justice was finally beginning to take its form. The tides were shifting. As the crowd erupted in applause, Derek felt a profound connection to everyone around him. Hope was tangible, and this was the beginning of a new movement, a fight against inequality that had long endured. Derek stood in the crowded gala hall, his heart pounding in his chest. The atmosphere thrummed with energy, but the weight of injustice pressed down on him like a heavy shroud. He glanced around, taking in the lavish decorations and the murmurs of wealthy patrons discussing art as if it were a commodity rather than a passion. He took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage. Today was the day he would confront the ugly truths of the art world head-on. With determination burning in his eyes, he stepped forward. Your privilege doesn't define talent, he declared, his voice ringing out clearly, cutting through the chatter. A hush fell over the crowd as his words echoed, filled with defiance and truth. Shock rippled through the audience, and murmurs of agreement began to spread like wildfire. Faces turned towards him, some filled with curiosity, others with empathy. It was a shared struggle he could feel in the room. Finally, someone is speaking out, one artist whispered to another, igniting a spark of solidarity. Richard Blackwell, standing near the front, shifted uncomfortably. Caught off guard, he felt irritation bubbling to the surface. What do you know about success? Richard snapped, trying to regain control of the narrative. You're just a struggling artist with a chip on your shoulder. But Derek stood firm, his resolve stronger than ever. You don't understand, he retorted. This isn't just about me. It's about all the artists who've been dismissed and ignored because they don't fit your narrow definition of success. The crowd shifted, visibly moved by Derek's fierce passion. Whispers of dissent began to circulate, challenging Richard's authority. With the tension thickening, Derek pressed on. I will not be silenced. We have voices and stories worth telling. No more will we accept a system that rewards privilege over talent. The atmosphere shifted dramatically, and Derek's determination shone bright against Richard's growing insecurity. The once supportive audience began to reconsider their loyalties, the notion of equity rising in their hearts. Amidst the emotional upheaval, Richard desperately attempted to regain control. He's just a nobody. Richard attempted to discredit Derek, his voice rising in irritation. Why should anyone listen to him? Derek met Richard's gaze, unyielding. Because I represent countless voices that have been pushed aside. This is not just about me. It's about raising awareness for every artist who has faced ridicule and rejection. With each of Derek's words, a coalition began to form behind him. Fellow artists stood up, ready to share their stories of struggle and resilience, echoing Derek's call for justice. Together, we are stronger, one shouted, and the audience began to rally. Derek looked around, heart swelling as he felt the support envelop him like a warm embrace. This isn't just about one artist, he emphasized, every word filled with conviction. This is about changing the narrative for all of us, demanding respect for our craft. As he spoke, the crowd's energy shifted into a symphonic wave of unity. Voices rose as the narrative pivoted, demanding respect for talent over privilege. Richard felt the ground beneath him crumble, his influence dwindling. The more he tried to salvage his status, the more isolated he became. "What's happening?" he heard a familiar voice murmur. A wave of realization washed over the crowd as they recognized the disparity between Derek's heartfelt authenticity and Richard's arrogant facade. In that pivotal moment, karma seemed to take hold. Derek's courage and resilience ignited a fire within the audience, transforming a gathering of privilege into a powerful chorus for change. Richard looked around, sensing the support evaporating as the weight of his arrogance pressed heavily on him. The voices of the crowd grew louder, unified in a demand for justice. His downfall crystallizing before his eyes, the tides had unequivocally shifted. "I should have never underestimated them," Richard thought, fear creeping into his resolve. He realized this was not just a fight he could silence. It was a wave of change he could not hold back. And as Derek stood at the forefront, the crowd rallied behind him. The first taste of justice was palpable in the air, signaling the beginning of a new and hopeful movement. Richard sat at his grand mahogany desk, staring in disbelief at the news reports flooding in on his laptop. The headlines screamed of unethical practices and corporate mismanagement at Riverbank Enterprises. "This can't be happening," he exclaimed, slamming his fist against the table. "I built this empire." His assistant, Marissa, stood nervously at the door, hesitating to interrupt. "Sir, the media seems relentless. It's all over social networks." "Enough! I don't need a reminder of my downfall," Richard snapped, running a hand through his hair, the pressure of losing control tightening around him. The walls of his office, once symbols of power and dominance, now felt suffocating, echoing the whispers of reckoning surrounding his misdeeds. He glanced at the articles detailing Derek's name increasingly linked to the stories against him. Richard's jaw tightened. Who does he think he is? A voice now after all this time. Meanwhile, whispers of hope filled the air among Derek's supporters, sparked by the exposés revealing Richard's unjust practices. "Finally, the truth is out," someone exclaimed excitedly at a local gallery, igniting discussion. "I can't believe it took this long," another added. "But Derek deserves this moment. He's a true artist." As the media frenzy continued to grow, Derek's profile started to ascend alongside Richard's downfall. Each negative headline about Richard only reinforced Derek's resilience and authenticity. Invitations to speak about his journey poured in. "I'm here to tell the stories that we've all felt but were too silenced to share," Derek declared passionately at a local forum, his heart swelling with purpose. "We changed the narrative. Our experiences matter." The audience responded with cheers and applause, a wave of support sweeping through the room. For so long, Derek had felt overlooked. Now, he stood as a voice for the voiceless, his art providing the platform he had yearned for. Meanwhile, Richard's isolation deepened. His once strong allies began withdrawing in the face of mounting scandals. "You've embarrassed us all," a formerly loyal board member shouted during a tense meeting, the disappointment in their voice palpable. "We cannot affiliate with your brand anymore." Richard felt the walls closing in. "I can fix this. Just give me some time," he pleaded, desperation creeping into his tone. But he was met with cold stares and silence. The financial losses began to mount as investors pulled out, recognizing the risks associated with remaining loyal to Richard. "We won't stand by you any longer," one colleague finally declared, sealing the fate of his crumbling empire. The echoes of dissent rang loudly as Richard knew that the foundation of his power was eroding beneath him. In contrast, Derek stood at a public forum, sharing his narrative of struggle and triumph. With fervor, "We can redefine our stories and rise together," he urged, inspiring those around him to reflect on their own battles against oppression. The crowd responded eagerly, shouting affirmations. Together, we fight for what's right, one artist called out, rising to emphasize their shared cause. As the climax approached, Richard faced the inevitable blow during a crucial art charity event, where new evidence against him was revealed by Derek. With resolve, he spoke to the audience, the truth echoing in every word. You're no longer a leader, Richard, but an example of what greed can destroy. Richard's face paled in the dim light, his arrogance collapsing as the crowd erupted into uproarious applause for Derek. Whispers of doubt transformed into unified shouts that filled the room with energy. With Richard's downfall finalized, Derek emerged as a beacon of hope. His work, once dismissed, now transformed into a powerful platform for advocacy. The recognition he had long fought for flowed in. This is just the beginning, he declared, standing tall in front of the energized crowd. His words resonated deeply, sparking both excitement and inspiration. As the audience cheered, Derek felt a sense of balance restored, knowing that his fight had not been in vain. Justice was finally served, and the tide of change was in motion. As Derek stood backstage, he could feel the excitement mixed with anxiety swirling within him. His exhibition was about to open, and this was his chance to shine. He whispered to himself, "This is my moment." Gritting his teeth, he pushed aside the nerves, reminding himself that he was ready to showcase the stories that mattered. Moments later, he shuffled onto the gallery floor. The buzz of anticipation enveloped him as patrons and fellow artists filled the space. He glanced at his pieces on the walls, art that reflected the struggles and aspirations of underrepresented voices. Felt surreal. "This is what true talent looks like?" a visitor exclaimed, pointing at Derek's work. The words ignited a flame of hope within him, affirming the power of art to convey messages that challenged societal norms. Derek took a deep breath and stepped further into the crowd, his heart swelling. Friends and fellow artists gathered around him, their support tangible. "We are all in this together," one of them proclaimed, raising a glass in celebration. Others cheered, and the atmosphere shifted, blending excitement with purpose. Derek felt fortified by their presence, knowing they were united against an unjust system. As the night progressed, Derek was approached by influential art critics and collectors, drawn to his raw talent. "You have something special," one critic said, a genuine smile spreading across their face. "People need to see your work." "Really? You think so?" Derek asked, astonished. The validation flooded him with confidence. "Absolutely. I see a voice in your art that others overlook," the critic replied. "Let's get you more exposure. You deserve it." Overwhelmed, Derek stepped away for a moment, taking a deep breath. He leaned against a wall, reflecting on his arduous path. "I fought hard for this moment," he thought. The countless tears, the struggles he faced, the sacrifices he made all led him to this powerful juncture. He felt the weight of his journey fueling his determination to inspire others, a guiding force embedded within him. In front of the crowd, Derek sensed it was time to address the people who had stood by him. Taking the stage, he gathered himself, his heart racing. "We're not just underdogs. We're warriors," he declared, each word ringing true. "We all have battles to fight, and it's time to change the narrative." Cheers erupted from the audience, voices rising in heartfelt agreement. Derek continued, emphasizing the necessity of change and advocating for future artists facing systemic biases. "I believe in a future where everyone has an opportunity to express their voice through their art. We can do this together." The audience listened, captivated, as Derek's passion ignited hope for a brighter future. It was a message that resonated deeply, and as he finished, they erupted into applause, a powerful wave of encouragement. Inspired by the collective support and recognition he had received, Derek made a commitment to mentor aspiring artists from marginalized backgrounds. "Let's lift each other up," he encouraged, knowing that he had the power to ensure opportunities were accessible to all. In the months that followed, Derek continued to amplify diverse voices in the art world. His work became a catalyst for change, and community initiatives took root, focusing on dismantling barriers that oppressed so many. "This is just the beginning," he reflected one day, a smile stretching across his face as he looked around at the flourishing movement. The tide was shifting toward justice, a testament to resilience and the unwavering spirit that burned brightly in every artist striving for recognition. Derek felt the surge of purpose coursing through him as he stood before a small group of supporters in his newly established art foundation. His voice was steady, but a fire burned within. Everyone deserves a chance to be heard, he declared, his eyes sweeping across the room filled with eager faces. Maya, one of the young artists, stepped forward, her hands trembling with excitement. What do we do first? She asked, her eyes shining with hope. Derek smiled, feeling energized by their enthusiasm. We launch mentorship programs. I won't let anyone else struggle in silence, not when we have the power to uplift each other. He glanced at the group, their energy invigorating him. Together, we can create opportunities for everyone. As time passed, stories of transformation began to emerge. One evening, at a gathering of artists, a man stood up, his voice filled with gratitude. This community has given me hope, he said, recalling how Derek's mentorship had inspired him to pursue his passion for painting. I never thought I could be an artist. Derek felt tears prick his eyes, pride swelling in his chest. This is what it's all about, he said passionately. We must continue to share our narratives. Each story we voice contributes to the change we want to see. The foundation began to grow, and Derek found himself becoming a beacon of change in the community. At a recent event, a respected critic approached him. You are the voice we've been waiting for, she remarked, acknowledging Derek's commitment to advocating for others in the fight against systemic barriers. Feeling embraced by the community, Derek organized celebrations that showcased diverse voices through art. As patrons mingled, the atmosphere brimmed with excitement and unity. Together, we are stronger, Derek proclaimed, raising his glass in a toast, inspiring everyone to share their experiences. The cheers echoed through the hall as connections flourished. In his unwavering commitment, Derek created events specifically spotlighting artists from underrepresented backgrounds. Everyone deserves to be seen and heard, he affirmed. His mission was clear: to elevate those who had been silenced for too long and to foster a sense of belonging among all artists. The fire in Derek grew more intense as he recognized that his work with art was merely one facet of the change needed. We must challenge the system at every level, he rallied the community. Our fight extends beyond art. We must advocate for equity and justice in all arenas. The enthusiasm in the room surged, and Derek felt invigorated by the optimism. They were ready and willing to join him in this journey. As the foundation flourished, Derek took a moment to reflect on his journey at an anniversary celebration. Standing before the crowd, he let a smile spread across his face. This is just the beginning, he declared, pride bubbling within him. Artists in the crowd cheered, recognizing the progress they had made as a community. Derek knew that while their road ahead would be challenging, they were empowered, rising together in the face of adversity, ready to continue their fight against the weights of privilege that so often held them back. Derek sat quietly in the dimly lit room, the weight of the journey heavy on his heart. Every struggle made me stronger, he mused aloud, running a hand through his hair. He reflected on how far he had come and how each hardship had shaped him. This isn't just about me. It's about all of us who feel oppressed and unseen. He closed his eyes, remembering the countless nights spent almost giving up, only to awaken with renewed determination. We must rise together, he thought, feeling grateful for the solidarity he had found within his community. They had fought alongside him, and it had made all the difference. As Derek walked through the busy streets, he began to see the transformation around him. Artists who had once been isolated by their struggles were now uniting, their voices growing stronger. Change is possible, he whispered, his heart swelling with pride at the knowledge that his efforts had sparked this movement. Later that day, he gathered with his peers at a meeting aimed at contemplating their next steps. Voices filled the room, each recounting personal challenges and triumphs. I can't believe how much we've grown, one artist said, excitement in their voice. We're no longer afraid to share our work. Derek nodded knowingly. Remember, our strength lies in support, he urged, looking at each of them. Together, we can uplift the overlooked and unheard. But as they celebrated, the shadow of Richard Blackwell loomed nearby, now a mere shell of his former self. Derek recalled the look on Richard's face when he realized his empire was crumbling. He thought he was untouchable, Derek reflected, a sense of poetic justice washing over him. He could scarcely believe it. Richard, who had mocked him for so long, was facing the consequences of his arrogance. In the days that followed, Derek continued to speak out for equality and justice. He became a beacon of hope for many. At a recent community gathering, He encouraged everyone to embrace their voices. "Our voices matter," he exclaimed passionately. "It's time we demand the respect we deserve." The crowd erupted in applause, resonating with Derek's words. He watched as enthusiasm spread like wildfire, encouraging others to rise and stand for their true worth. Yet, he understood that while progress had been made, their journey was far from over. "We have much work to do," he stated firmly, ready to mobilize everyone for the long fight ahead. "Together, we can create lasting change." Derek also realized the importance of inspiring future generations. He began mentoring young artists, sitting with them to share his experiences, hoping to ignite the same fire within them. "You are the future," he told them earnestly. "Use your voices and talents to challenge the status quo. You can change the world." With every whispered word of encouragement, Derek could see the light in their eyes grow brighter. They were ready to embrace the fight for justice alongside him, and he felt proud of their collective spirit. Looking ahead, Derek envisioned a world where equality and creativity thrived without boundaries. "This is just the beginning," he declared confidently to a gathering of artists. "We will continue to foster a culture of inclusion, and together, we will ensure that justice prevails." The audience responded with thunderous applause, and Derek felt hope pulse through the room. They were a tapestry of dreams, each thread vibrant with possibility, ready to weave a future where every voice could be heard and celebrated. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring content. Your support means the world and helps spread the message of resilience and empowerment.